On November 17th, Maddesyn George received a prison sentence, and it was just one chapter in a longer history between Native Americans and carceral systems. Maddesyn was charged with manslaughter and has been in jail for over a year, but activists say the shooting that led to the charges was in self-defense against a white man who sexually assaulted her. Those same activists called for Maddesyn to face as little prison time as possible, and by pointing out connections between Maddesyn's case and larger histories of anti-Native violence, they succeeded.
Maddesyn George is a Native woman from the Coville tribe.
Maddesyn is a mom also to her toddler, Shine. Maddesyn went through a lot of difficult experiences in her life, including a long-term domestic violence relationship, and following that became caught up in an addiction with primarily meth, and she was acquainted with this man, Christopher Graber.
Maddesyn reported that Graber sexually assaulted her. When she left afterward, she took some money and drugs. Graber came looking for Maddesyn on her reservation. Activists told me that witnesses said Maddesyn was in danger for her life. That's when the shooting happened.
So the court has promulgated this idea that Graber has some right to property that trumps Maddesyn's bodily autonomy. Like many people, Maddesyn took a plea deal instead of, waiting upon the mercy of a jury who may or may not be understanding of the complex history of, colonization and the history of sexualized violence in relationship to settlers and MMIP.
The Free Maddesyn George campaign is a group of supporters of Maddesyn's freedom.
All of us, for various reasons, recognize the overlapping injustices in the case.
There's no understanding what happened in Maddesyn's life without understanding the history of colonial violence.
Rape and sexual assault was a documented part of the way that colonization happened. It's a direct way that people reenact a larger system that takes away from a group of people's humanity.
Maddesyn's case sums up all of the historical context, all of the ongoing colonial technologies of policing and surveillance, all the tremendous failures of the state to uphold even the most scant responsibility they have to Indigenous peoples.
If you watch an episode of Law and Order, you sort of get this impression that if you experience a sexual assault, that you can call 911 and that there will people that will come and help you and will put this person away. But even in that scenario, the person that gets put away is only separated from the person that they cause that immediate harm to, and can still cause harm to all kinds of other people wherever they are. And the person that experienced the harm isn't protected from experiencing that kind of harm again.
People will ask but what if you're the victim? And to that I say, well, first of all, look at Maddesyn's case. Very clear situation of not having any healing brought unto her.
Indigenous communities have a long history of being subjected to carceral systems, and a long history of defying them. California's first system of caging was built to cage Tonga people on their homelands. It faced resistance from organizers who burned down holding facilities and freed prisoners. And before colonization, many communities had ways of addressing harms that didn't involve police or prisons.
In a prison state, we just see such high rates of Native and Black and Latinx and Pacific Islander people incarcerated. It really does sort of speak to this willingness on society's part to sort of throw people away.
The reason, the why, why would the state act this way? This is how they get access to Native land. So when they start picking us off one by one, in all the ways that we've been made vulnerable to violence, to addiction, to harm, and then they start criminalizing us for surviving, it does a lot of ideological work for the project of settler colonialism, which is to minimize Native people's political position and to render their lands available for appropriation, for exploitation and theft.
The prosecution declined to comment for this story, but referred me to court documents they had filed. In one memo, the prosecution lists different ways Maddesyn could have handled the situation, including asking Graber to leave. But where the prosecution points to witness accounts saying Graber seemed calm, activists point to other witnesses saying the opposite. The memo states Maddesyn contradicted herself in her interview with police, but activists say this is common for sexual assault survivors. Prosecutors also highlighted a history of violence and drug dealing, and activists say this speaks to larger trends of criminalizing survivors and victim blaming.
Regardless of what kind of life Maddesyn lives, she deserves respect, bodily integrity, and autonomy, and she deserves to be believed.
The way the prosecution is trying to skew this to make believe like we don't know what we're talking about is so similar to this notion that actually European people just get to have all of this land and all of these things, and that Maddesyn doesn't even get to defend herself. Right? She doesn't even get to say, I will not let you kill me.
The prosecution called for Maddesyn to face up to 17 years in prison. After her hearing, she now faces one 5-year sentence and one 6.5-year sentence to be served at the same time. Before the hearing, activists told me they would seek a presidential pardon for Maddesyn. Now, their focus is supporting her family.
How do we continue to provide support and also just like a witness to what's actually happening as opposed to the story that the prosecution and the state want to tell? That she's a bad person. She's a person that deserves to be thrown away. I don't believe that that's true for anybody.